disclaimer, this podcast was actually supposed to come out about 2 weeks ago, but when we recorded this podcast, the news of the Mustang aero changes came out just after we finished recording it. So it's a little bit delayed, but it's out now, so enjoy. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange Podcast. I'm here, as always, with Shane. How you going, Shane?
Mate, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good. We're going to be covering a couple different things today. We're going to be covering a new eSports category that Supercars will be running, the possible fifth event for Bathurst, and then we're going to be looking at some changes that we'd like to see in Supercars. But first off, something that I'm pretty excited about is the new eSports event that Supercars just announced that's going to be in August, and it's going to be on a proper simulator. This time it's going to be on iRacing rather than Forza, which I'm very glad about because iRacing is a much superior game. I know a lot of people aren't really that into eSports, or they like not thinking it's like real kind of racing, but I just enjoy it just for the fun of it kind of thing. But there isn't too many details just yet announced. All we know that it's going to be hosted in August, and it's going to be over a whole series, and then there'll be 12 teams which will be selected through the actual Supercars teams. That'll be pretty exciting, and GRM have already announced that they're going to be putting a team in, so that seems pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited. I'm gonna at least try to qualify for it, but I don't think I'm quite fast enough for that.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably be slower. I've got Forza is one of my favourite games on the Xbox, and I've been a fan of racing games since I was a kid. Even I think before I was a fan of racing itself, but. Esports in general has been it's taken over the world in the last few years. It's you see it covering just about every sport. Like obviously racing, you got FIFA, and as well as you got some of the other role playing games and stuff like that as well, where it's become a huge thing. And I'm glad they've gone to iRacing, because anytime you see any footage on that, it's a much more refined racing sim over Forza, which is still a little bit arcadey. It tries hard, but it's still on an Xbox after all. They're going to be using some pretty high-tech computers, you reckon, to power this. So, and obviously they're going to use the best of steering wheels and pedals and everything like that. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it.
I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how into it the teams get. But I think it's got to be pretty good regardless. The Harvey Norman series that they had in the last couple of years has been pretty good, so it'll probably be pretty good again, hopefully. They're moving on to a possible fifth event for Bathurst, which would be it'd be awesome to see. But the only thing is, what is it going to be? There's been bids from lots of different categories, ranging from touring cars up to supercars, who will be going for maybe a sprint round, and even a historic event, which I think would be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, well, it's going to be pretty exciting to see what, if any, comes through. They reckon it's pretty concrete that it's going to happen. It's just a matter of what. There's been talk for a long time about supercars getting a sprint around out there. They have done it once before, back in the 90s somewhere, but I think it only happened once. There's also the second circuit that's going out there, just a more of a traditional track. Whether that might count as the event as well, I'm not too sure, but I'd like to see a proper sort of week-long, like Goodwood Festival of Speed type thing, which can include historic racing. I reckon that would be the way to go for me. But even then, like, we could see a TCR championship that's starting up fairly soon. It could make an appearance out there. Yeah. I have seen in some of the Facebook comments, people have been like, what about TCR 1000? I'm like, well, they're not the fastest of cars. A TCR 1000 is probably going to take about 8 hours to do. We're not going to be on the same pace as a supercar, but maybe they could put in a 500k race Whether that would still be exciting to watch TCR cars for 500Ks or not, I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
We even joked the other night that how cool would it be to see the World Endurance Championship there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd have the pit facilities to cope with the entire field, but I get it would be cool. And my wish list would be IndyCar, Formula One. I know I couldn't go there because of the track's not up to their standard, but I think it would probably allow IndyCar.
I think it'd be weird to have something that isn't like an endurance race, because obviously like a lot of the events that we watch at Bathurst are endurance races, like the 12-hour and the 24-hour, and obviously the 6-hour and the 12-hour and the 1000. So I think it kind of either has to be like a historic event, like a week-long event, like Goodwood, like you were saying, or like an endurance event. I think it'd be a little bit weird otherwise.
Yeah, well, that's it. As soon as you hear the word or the name Bathurst, you just assume, or just your mind immediately jumps to a race that's going to take most of the day.
Yeah.
We have seen the 24-hour race there in the past. I think it was kind of popular, but I think when they shortened it to 12 hours, I think its popularity has become a lot higher because of that.
Yeah.
I think anything that's at least at the very minimum a race that's going to go for 3 or 4 hours, I think is the minimum. At least it gives a value for money in terms of sitting down to watch the race, or for the punters that are going to fork out their hard-earned to go down and watch a race.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, I think my money definitely would be on a Goodwood Festival of Speed style event. That it could even end on the weekend with a decent race.
Yeah.
Out on the circuit then.
You've also got to remember that Bathurst is a fair way from like any kind of major city. So unless you like live around that rural New South Wales area, you've got to travel a fair way most of the time to actually get to Bathurst. So you don't want to be going all that way for just like 2 races, like two sprint races on like a Saturday and Sunday. I don't know how many people would actually make the trip for that, really.
Yeah, like if the racing was good, like again, as that pure hypothetical, if it was IndyCar, even though that would only be a 2-hour race, it's IndyCar. It's going from all around Australia. It would do the same. Well, you'd have a lot of people still flying in from around the world because it's IndyCars at Bathurst. Like anyone who's a racing fan, they know Bathurst. So I think, again, that's very much wishful thinking. I would very much doubt, but it would just be, it'd be awesome to see something like that, like a big international category make the way. Even perhaps, something like DTM over in like the German touring cars, like something like that, completely different that you wouldn't expect to see here.
Yeah.
Just might be, if it was just a Supercars sprint round, I don't think I'd be overly, like, I'll obviously watch it. It'll still be good, but you fixed from the Bathurst 1000 is with the Supercars at least.
Yeah. I think if they had like a Goodwood Festival of Speed kind of week, that'd be really good, because you see that there's like a lot of historic cars in Australia. They just don't get much use. Like there was the Group C Porsche 962 at the Bathurst 6-hour on the weekend, which was so cool to see. But they weren't allowed to. They were in a regularity class, so they couldn't even set like a fast lap time, which was really unfortunate, because obviously that car can absolutely fly, but they were limited to like 2 minutes 36 or something in the end. I don't think I will have like a major overseas category coming over, just because it's going to be costing them so much to get over here, and plus it also, you have to consider the fact that a lot of those kind of categories, especially like IndyCar and maybe even DTM, consider Bathurst as like one of the more dangerous tracks, where it's probably going to end up costing them lots of money to repair the cars because they go at such high speeds around there, obviously.
Yeah, well, that's right. Of course, there'll be something that those categories would have to think about if they were ever approached to come out here. But we do see supercars go around there, and yet you do have those big accidents. But like DTM, they're it's expensive to fix that. But I don't think you'd see like too many massive accidents. They carry a lot of downforce. They'd be stuck to the road a lot more than what a supercar would. IndyCar, yeah, of course, if if one of them got it wrong coming down through the dipper, that's going to hurt. But it's the same with them. Like you go to any oval over in the States, and there's always big accidents there. So it's just come to the territory with racing. They're going to be used to paying the bills if the driver gets it wrong.
Yeah. So overall, what event do you think you'd want to see at Bathurst?
I think a good Wood Festival of Speed, just have some historic racing throughout the category. They could even still have, the TCR Championship incorporated, like have a round of theirs incorporated into an event like that. I think as long as it went for a week and, people would go down and camp there and, you may not show up for the whole week. You might just go for a couple of days earlier in the week or later in the week and, whichever way you go. And then, sprinkle some racing through there, see some of the old classic cars that you may not otherwise get to see out on track once that have been locked up in the museum there. Bathurst has a really awesome motor racing museum down there, which I'll be fortunate enough to go to in just a few days' time when I'm on a bit of a road trip down to Sydney. So I'll be sure to get some photos.
Amazing.
So but they've got that museum, and I'm sure they would have no hassle firing up a lot of these cars to get out on track to do a couple of demo laps for the fans. So, I think that's ultimately what I would like to see, and it's probably the most cost-effective way to put something in there.
Yeah, I probably agree with you on that. But probably what's pretty equal for me would be seeing a 24-hour race there. I just think a 24-hour race in Australia would be really cool. Or even possibly like a WEC race, even though it might not be able to hold all of the category. Like a 6-hour WEC race or something, I thought would be also pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think endurance racing is what Bathurst is all about, so I think that would fit in well.
Righto, so moving on to the next little part of this podcast, we're going to be talking about what kind of changes we think will be possibly happening in the future. Actually, briefly, we've also got to talk about the S5000 open wheelers that were signed off on recently.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a good category. I think when it's meant to be a throwback to the old Formula 5000 days, like when they brought out the concept car a couple of years ago. It looked like a bit of a 1970s F1 car, but with the 5-litre Ford V8 in the back of it. It sounded fantastic. It looked a little bit weird just because it's this new car that's supposed to be a bit of a throwback to the old days. I didn't really like that idea about this new style, which is I can't remember who make the chassis. Not off head. It's disappeared, but it might have been. But I thought it was great. Like, it's still got that same 5-litre Ford motor, which is effectively the Mustang engine, and it's going to be fast. Like, obviously they've had to put the halo on the car, which I'm not a fan of in any regard. Look, it's made the cars a bit of an eyesore in Formula One, but it's just how all open wheelers are going to go at some stage. But I'm really looking forward to it. Gary Rogers Motorsport in charge of building the car. It got signed off back on the weekend, so I'm really looking forward to it. I think as long as we can see a decent grid, like we've seen with them when they introduced Formula 4 into Australia, like 7 or 8 cars on the grid for the first wasn't the most exciting. It's going to be a lot more expensive than Formula 4, which makes me worried that it might take a little while to see a bit more of a full-size grid. But at the same time, if it's a much more exciting form of open-wheel racing, it might attract more people into it. So, yeah, if we can at least get 12 or 14 cars for that first race, I think it'll be good.
It's I don't think it'll be as boring as the Super Utes though. So like we're pretty covered there.
Yeah, well, that's it. They're not quick, but we're almost guaranteed a rollover though.
Yeah, that's true. I think we've had a rollover at almost every circuit so
Yeah,
far.
that's it.
And there was
even when they look like they shouldn't be rolling over, they just there they go, they flip over. So I don't think it's doing too much for the market for the manufacturers that are involved.
Yeah, there was that really weird flip over at Queensland Raceway last year, where like they almost ended up in the crowd. It really exposed the safety issues that Queensland Raceway has.
Yeah, well, that and just the Utes in general. Like I had high hopes for the category, but it has really flopped a bit. I think people were excited at first, but compared to the old V8 Utes that we used to see with the Falcon and Holden Utes running around, that was exciting. They were always rubbing panels and everything like that. It was still fairly fast. Then we see these Utes, the snow, the cumbersome. Like you'll still see them. Big puffs of black smoke pouring out the back when they're getting on the power, and that it just wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I think over in New Zealand they got the Sanyong series, the big dual cab, cheap Chinese Utes over there. That was actually quite exciting to watch, and I thought, wow, it's supposed to be at least close to that, and it just hasn't been. So I think it has flopped, unfortunately.
It's we might see the V8 Utes like the original ones at the Goodwood Festival of Speed for the Australian version. That would be
that's it. Like, I'm sure a lot of them are still floating around somewhere. So I'm sure they might be able to fire a few of those back up and send them out on track. Would be good to see.
That'd be awesome. Anyway, so moving on to the next little section, as I mentioned previously, we're going to be looking at what the future might hold and some previous rumours that have occurred in supercars. So, Shane, would you like to kick us off with that?
Yeah, well, we've seen that just in the last week, supercars have announced that I'll put ahead a proposal of going to a 4-litre turbocharged V8 category in order to weirdly cut costs, which I'm not too sure how that works because suddenly start designing and building a whole new engine. But it'll be a way of trying to attract other marquees in, like trying to see if Mercedes might jump back into the category as a proper manufacturer. Even the likes of Audi and BMW, I think was sort of mentioned it in there too. I'm not too sure if that would be that keen. I don't think it's worth changing the history of the sport, being that 5-litre V8 category. It has, we all know how awesome they sound. If anyone's ever live, they sound fantastic. A 4-litre V8 is not going to sound the same, and especially if it's turbocharged. The redirected exhaust going back through the turbo kills a lot of that sound. We've seen what it's done to Formula One. Yeah. And even though we did see, like when Holden, they brought out the turbo twin turbo V6, and they showed it off around Bathurst a couple of years ago. It still sounded really good. I was actually still impressed with how good that engine. The flutter of the wastegate when it was off throttle, then when it was on throttle, you could hear a little bit of that turbo whistle. It still had a decent sound coming out the back. Whether or not that's just because they had pretty much straight pipes out the back, I don't know. That it still had a muffler or not. But as long as it still made sound, that's all I cared about. So that didn't sound too bad. But you knew it's a twin turbo V6, so you expect it to sound different.
Yeah.
If it was a 4-litre turbo V8, we're used to that V8 sound. If it's not making that same sound anymore, it's got its appeal, and fans will walk away if it's not for that sound. Like we've seen Formula One, has died off in popularity a bit over the last few years since they introduced the turbo V6 because it doesn't have that same sound, it doesn't have the same theatre. and that to sound as fast as they would drive. Now they don't. And I would worry about the same sort of thing in V8s if they didn't have the same volume of noise, that it might not have the same appeal.
Yeah. Obviously, you touched on it a little bit there, but not too long ago, a lot of you guys would remember that Supercars was trying to go for a turbocharged V6 kind of setup as well, which Triple Eight looked like they were going to actually run at one point. I know that the Facebook comments were going off about it, everyone thinking that Triple Eight was actually running the V6 turbo. I think it was in season 2017. They were going to say that they were running it then, but then they just didn't end up running it due to costs and all that as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I think there was a few things behind it. I know that they did the demo run in 2017. It was supposed to come in 2018. They weren't going to have it ready for the start of the ZB era in Supercars, but so they said, "Oh, get a start off with the V8." They were thinking about still running a wildcard at a couple of races. I know a lot of the teams weren't happy with the twin turbo V6, and any manufacturer now still permitted to run a twin turbo V6. So that Ford could turn around tomorrow and say, well, "Here's our new engine. It's a V6. We're going to use it." They'll be well within their rights.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of the teams weren't happy because, from what I can remember, Triple Eight were going to own all of the engines and lease them out to all of the other Holden teams. They weren't happy about because they weren't going to be able to do their own engine program that Wilkinshaw's done theirs for a long time now. I think Brad Jones Racing and Erebus get their motors from them. So that wasn't going to happen anymore. It was all going to come through Triple Eight, and you weren't going to own any of the engines. You were just going to be leasing them, and that at the end of the season, they'll all go back. And I think Triple Eight was saying that, it's more cost effective for the teams, it saves them more money, but then Triple Eight have all the engines. So it caused when some people put the line a bit of how clean Triple Eight really are. But I think I think it just sounded a bit too weird, and the other teams weren't liking it. But as we've seen, they ended up scrapping the idea, which is a little bit of a shame because I was looking forward to seeing a twin turbo V6 up against the Ford V8s that would have been in the Mustang, and then the V8 that was still in the Nissan. But I think it would have also raised a lot of other issues too. Like obviously being a turbo V6, it's going to chew a lot less fuel than what the V8 would. So you've always got that. There would have been a big difference on the fuel usage throughout the course of a race, and especially somewhere like Bathurst. Like if you were able to get that extra 4 or 5 laps onto a stint, that's a huge advantage to have. And I don't think Supercars. Yeah, that's it. Like Supercars, I think it was becoming too hard. No doubt Ford and Nissan would have been blowing up saying, it's got to be equal on how much they can burn fuel, how quickly they can burn fuel. Like if they had a slight advantage, like if it meant that at most tracks they might get that extra lap, I don't think anyone would have cared. Because we see even with the V8s now, some teams burn fuel a little bit higher than others anyway.
Yeah.
But then how do you work that out? Like it'd be a very hard thing to do if they're going to burn fuel at a less rate. Do you give them less fuel, but then they have a weight advantage when the tanks are full? You could make that up with a bit of extra ballast in the car, but then they're carrying that ballast around the whole race when even when the tanks are empty, they still might have that extra 5 or 6 kilos worth of ballast.
Yeah.
So then that would be a disadvantage to the Holden teams. I think it just started to throw up so many issues of how they're going to bring it in and still be on, like, allow them to be on a level playing field with they'll be advantaged or disadvantaged by having it. I guess we'll never know. But I think that, for all we know, if they did bring it back this year, and put it in the cars, they might have been in the same position that Ford are in now, and have just they've won everything.
Yeah.
Just because overall power would have been easy to work out. They would have just tuned the car up or tuned the car down according to how much power they need. Which I think it's around 650 horsepower, so that would be easy to work out. It's all the other stuff that goes along with it being a completely different engine to the V8.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you're talking about fuel consumption there. It's like I'm just thinking about like the GT3 category that runs in Australia GT. All those cars get really different fuel consumption, obviously, because they're all very different cars. So like the Bentley Continental GT3 uses a huge amount of fuel, and I think its stints were really short around Bathurst for the 12-hour compared to everyone else. I think it was the worst on fuel consumption, but they were easily the fastest car, but they didn't win it in the end because the Porsche 911, which wasn't really the fastest car around there because it's not very good in a straight line, ended up winning just because the fuel consumption in the 911 was just so good, and they just beat it. So I think that's what it's probably would be like if that turbo V6 would be to be employed. So they've got to like figure out a way probably to make sure that everyone's getting like the same kind of consumption, which is obviously, as you were saying, it's an absolute minefield in order to work that out. But yeah, it's just it's a very difficult concept to try and employ.
Yeah, that's it. Especially when Supercars is a technical parity sport, so they all want them to have the same aero. Like they do have, like the actual wing part of the rear wing is the exact same on all the cars, but they make their own end plates for each car. I think the front splitter, I think it's all the same. Obviously, it's the same chassis now, so like there's a lot of things that are made to be the same, so that it's all the same 110 litre fuel tank. Between Ford, Holden, and Nissan, they're going to burn fuel different. Like at some tracks, like I said, you might get that extra lap, others won't. But it's all there or thereabouts. There's no outstanding advantage by being able to run 2 or 3 laps longer at Bathurst because you've been able to save that 10 litres of fuel over the course of that stint, and that's what GT racing is as popular as it is, because there is that big variation in the cars. There's you've got that where we've got to stop more. There's all those sorts of ones. Like it goes along with what we see in WEC. For a long time, it was just old petrol engines, and then they started slowly going over to diesel engines, and then we seen the jump now to hybrid engines. And it's silly to think that diesel's going to win you Le Mans, because it's not. The hybrids is what you need.
Yeah.
So it's again, GT racing's a little bit skewed towards that as well, where Supercars is meant to be. We try and keep everybody on a level playing field, and then just send them out in the track and we'll go racing. Like that, and that's where we see the big at the moment about parity with the Mustang. Like if it has such a big advantage with the aero, we'll wait and see on that one. But that's another conversation.
Yeah.
But that's that would be the big issue for the twin turbo V6 is whether they can still nail down the fuel consumption so it's about even, so there's no big advantage there without being a big advantage with horsepower. I think reliability would have been a bit of an issue for the first year perhaps as well, but that's just part and parcel with the new engine. If it took them a year to iron, then so be it. But surely between all the teams they wouldn't have all had issues on the same day, but there might have been 1 or 2 cars with turbo issues or something like that, which may have been a pain, but that's.
So moving on to the next little subsection, we're going to be talking about what we would like to see in the category. So, what would we want to see if we had the keys to the supercars for the day? So, Shane, would you like to kick us off with that part?
Yeah, like it's anyone who's ever been a fan of the sport, just things like if I was just in charge for a day, the things that I would want to do. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
It's just our fantasy of what we would want to do and see in the sport and change. For me, I think number one is I think now is the best time that we've had in sport to look back overseas to host more rounds. I know it's still predominantly been an Australian sport. We've gone to New Zealand. We've tried China once before. It failed. It didn't get the same popularity they were hoping for. The Middle East worked for a couple of years, but they mainly went there to try and see if they can find some money from the Middle East to that might be invested back in the sport. Didn't really work. They tried the States once as well at Circuit of the Americas. I think it was relatively popular over there. It only lasted the 1 year, but it still didn't work in the end. But I think now it would, because we no longer have the Falcon, which that upsets me still. But we no longer have the Falcon in the sport. We've gone to the Mustang, and with all it's still a pretty big push for that if the regulation changed a little bit to accommodate it. And so I think going back to the States now would absolutely work, because we would have the two, big American, muscle cars in the category, like in a Camaro and a Mustang. We'll still likely see the Commodore in there too, which I don't think that's on sale in the States at all under any other brand name. But at least but they would be able to recognise those two cars, where the first time they would have seen, that's a Ford, but it's a Falcon. We don't have Falcons. And they had the Commodore, but I'll go over there, it's not a Holden Commodore. They've had the old Pontiac GTO, which was the Monaro, and recently they had the Chevy SS, which was the VF Commodore. But I think they'd have that now, and not to mention too, you've also got Penske and you've got Andretti involved in the sport. So they've got those two massive names, like the two most famous names in American motorsport, that are involved in our category. I think that would have just be a much bigger draw card, that they've got cars that they're familiar with, and two names involved in the teams, especially when one's, at the moment, the reigning champions. Whether it would still be that in a couple of years, we don't know yet. But if they're both lighting up the front, that's going to draw a crowd. Yeah. So for me, if I had it my way, I'd be having back-to-back rounds in the States. Like one, I think Circuit of the Americas again would work. But I think to help us out with our time zone, I reckon if you're able to use to light the circuit, again, like, if I'm in charge, I'm in charge of the money, so I'm paying to do it. So I would light that short circuit up, and I'll just go just something completely different that we don't normally see. Like if they raced on the Friday night over there, I think it's if it started at 6 p.m. over there, I think it would be about 9 p.m. or 9 a.m. over here on the Saturday morning, which wouldn't be a bad time to start a race. So you could have a nighttime race over there, like a 250k race on the shorter circuit at night. It'd be great to see, going brake discs, flames out the exhaust, all that sort of stuff. And then on the Saturday afternoon, their time, which is morning over here, I would then go to the long circuit, the Grand Prix circuit, and have another 250k race around that, just so you've got two completely different tracks. They would have to be set up completely different. Anyone who knows the circuit knows how long that back straight is. It's a massive long straight. Yeah. They'll be nudging on 300 k's by the end of that, into a big stop at the end of it. Even sharper corner than what we see at the Chase at Bathurst. Yeah. And so it'll just be something different, having two different circuits on the same weekend. One race at night, one race during the day. You could just have it all wrapped up in a couple of days. They can practice and qualify for the Friday race on the Friday, and then Saturday they do practice and qualifying again for the long circuit race that afternoon, it's done and dusted. And then a couple of weeks later, I would love to see him at Laguna Seca. It's almost it's sort of part Phillip Island, part Bathurst.
Yeah.
For anyone that's not familiar with it, it's got some fast corners, it's got some slow corners. Obviously, the best part about it is the corkscrew. It's like an oversized version of the dipper. It's just a big scary corner that big change in elevation from the top down to the bottom of that series of corners. Thing that would still have the dipper at Bathurst winning for me is that there's no margin for error at the dipper. If you get it wrong, you're in the wall, and it's going to hurt. Where at least at the corkscrew, you've got a bit of runoff, so you might have a chance to survive the day and get out the other side and keep racing. But I reckon somewhere like Laguna Seca is tailor-made for a V8 race, and being on the west coast of the States, it helps a little bit with the time zones, but also for any fans that would go over there if you had back-to-back rounds. You could fly over there, make a holiday of it, and see 2 rounds of the Supercars at the same time, I reckon. And then for the local fan too, they've got those brand names that they're familiar with, and Penske and Andretti, as the Mustang and the Camaro as well. But I still think I wouldn't stop there. I'd go over to Europe as well in an effort to try and because we've now got the Holden Commodore, or otherwise known as the Opel Insignia. So they would be familiar with that car. There's still a lot of expat Aussies that live over in the UK, I'm sure, and the UK just loves their motorsport anyway. Yeah. I reckon a race at Silverstone would work, and then somewhere else in Europe, I would have another race in like Italy or Germany or something like that too, and then and I'll try and have a crack again at somewhere in Asia. Yeah. We've seen the proposal of Malaysia. I think I kind of like it. I don't know if I like it at the Grand Prix circuit though, because it is such a big circuit.
Yeah.
It's just a long sweeping track. It's more a track suited to F1, force, everything like that. And then and like motorcycle racing, I think works there as well. But a couple of years ago they had the Kuala Lumpur Grand Prix, like that sort of bit of a festival of speed style event where they had categories from all around Asia and Australia go there and demonstration races, and Supercars went there and had one car from each manufacturer when we had the 5 in there at that stage.
Yeah. And
went and raced around that circuit. It was a great little street circuit. And there was a lot of talk about going there in 2016 in that same circuit. I reckon that should be looked at again as well. So for me, I'd have the 6 international rounds, including New Zealand, like 2 in the States, 2 in Europe, 1 back in Asia. I think that's the best way to try and expand the sport and hopefully bring in a couple of new manufacturers, yet to be seen. But I think now's the time to go for that if they're looking at expanding overseas again. But obviously the hard part with that is it's going to leave less space on the calendar for Australian circuits. So I would actually look at alternating some circuits between each other each year. So like Winton and Queensland Raceway could alternate year to year. Simmons Plains and Perth can alternate year to year. Like, it'd be a shame to lose these circuits, but otherwise you'd have a 20 race calendar, and that would be getting a bit too much. But I think if you alternated it, I think it would be the calendar looking a bit more fresh, because you're not going to see the same circuits there every year.
Yeah.
A mortgage on it. So, Bathurst, Newcastle, Adelaide, of course, Townsville would be another one that you would definitely lock some of those in there. And you'd never change them. Like even Sandown, like I'd take the 500 away from Sandown, because it's not, the last few years it hasn't been that exciting. I'd put the 500 back at Phillip Island. Or even somewhere new, like completely new altogether. maybe at the Bend it might be more suited to the Bend circuit. It might be a bit better suited to there or something like that. But I think alternating the circuit will keep the calendar a little bit fresh, even though, especially if you're in Perth, you're not going to see the V8s every year, but at least the year that they are there, you're going to want to go. But even then, if you had that race in Malaysia, it's the flight's no longer to go to Malaysia than what it is to fly back across to Sydney. Yeah. So I think a lot of West Australians would happily jump on the flights in Malaysia. We see that already now with the Grand Prix, especially with Dan Ricciardo being a Perth boy. They all, like anyone that lives in Perth that wants to go to a Grand Prix, go to the Singapore Grand Prix, because it's a shorter flight than flying to Melbourne to watch the race there. So, and they can couple that with the overseas holiday. So, I think alternating those tracks, some of the tracks, the ones that might, not the ones that are boring, because we still see some really great racing at a lot of those circuits, but the ones where certainly the locals go, Winton, a lot, like everybody from rural Victoria, they'll show up that want to watch the race. But I don't think anyone's flying down to Winton from Brisbane or from Townsville or from Adelaide to go watch Winton, where, of course, Adelaide people fly in from all over Australia to watch.
Yeah.
Like those tracks where it's just the locals, I think, start alternating some of those. But a track like Newcastle, again, of course, you got a lot of locals, but you do have a lot of people fly in from around Australia to watch that race. So those ones that have that draw from, they're the ones that stay. The ones that are more about just for the local area start alternating.
Yeah. So for me, I probably wouldn't. I was more looking towards like changing the cars more than looking at circuits. So for my vision, I'd probably for the next generation car. I'm hoping they do this anyway. Is change the whole roll loop to make it lower so the Mustang doesn't look so ridiculous, and design the chassis to make it more suited to two-door cars. Then I think that would let a lot of more manufacturers actually join in the sport as well. Because obviously Nissan has got the 370, so they could possibly have something like that, obviously, if Nissan stays in the sport. And it also opens up the door for Mercedes as well. It does kind of risk it becoming a little bit like GT3 categories, but I think if they introduce the Camaro and the Mustang into it, the Mustang's already there, I think it will keep it as more of a muscle car kind of category.
Well, just on that, I think, again, because we do our technical parity different in supercars to what we see in GT racing, so it would still be a fair bit different. I think I think a lot of two-door cars are the way we're going to go. Look, we're seeing a lot less manufacturers making sedans now anyway. A lot of them have gone to SUV, so we're not seeing Ford. Like, they're not even making four-door cars anymore. Like, it's just SUVs and the Mustang is what they're going to in the States. Obviously, Ford doesn't have the Falcon anymore, and so we're just seeing a lot less sedans out there. So I think it's just even though people might not like the two-door racing or two-door cars in the sport, but I think it's probably going to start going that way anyway, because that's all that's going to be available. There's not going to be the sedans to put in there, but even Jaguar, I'd love to see Jaguar in the sport. Whether they'll still, I think that's also another reason why they wanted to go to this 4-litre category, is to try and entice other manufacturers in. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I think overall they need to find ways to bring the cost down overall to make it cheaper and entice other manufacturers in. Because if we just kept it as Ford versus Holden, or maybe Ford versus Chevy and Holden, you still want to see another manufacturer in there. Like, we're not going to see the Nissans in there forever. Obviously, they've already left the sport as a manufacturer, that Kelly's are just running the Nissans off their own back. How long that sticks around for, I'm not too sure. It might still do it next year, but I would think at some stage they would have to switch back to Holden or something. So that'd be one less car on the grid. So I think we need to at least try and get back up to 4, being in the championship to make it exciting.
Yeah. Also, what I'd probably do is they only did it this year, but make the endurance rounds in the correct order and actually put it the 500 and then the 1000 rather than whatever the hell they've done this year. And also, I think Gold Coast is before Bathurst or something weird like that.
I think Sandown. So I think Bathurst opens it up, and then I think it goes to Gold Coast, then Sandown, or the other way around. But I think Bathurst is the first, it's just stupid. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah.
I think partly because there was a lot of talk. I don't know if they're still going ahead with it, but they want to move Supercars to a summer series,
which is stupid.
Which I don't like because I guess in some ways it makes sense. Like they're trying to argue, I think more for the southern states, that when they go out to the race in the middle of winter, it's bloody cold, of course. But on the flip side of that, could you imagine going to you're in Townsville, so going to the Townsville race in the middle of summer when it's it might be 32, 33 degrees, but
like 36.
1,000% humidity. Yeah, that's it. Going out to Ipswich, Queensland Raceway in the middle of summer when it's 40 degrees.
Exactly.
And I can guarantee anyone that lives in this area knows that almost every afternoon in summertime you've always got that storm that rolls through Ipswich. And could you imagine what if there was 5,000 cars out in the car park and all of them got smashed by hail because they wanted to go and watch Supercars for a day? They're not going to be happy. So there's any not going to drive to Ipswich with that chance of getting your car smashed by hail. Part of it could work. Yes, if you had those southern races in summer, where it might be a little bit cooler, but we've seen Adelaide this year, it was 40 degrees during the race, and that was March, So I think winter is the better way to go. They're trying, they do it already, where they spend more time up the northern end during the middle of winter. They go to Darwin, Townsville, then down Queensland Raceway, and then it finishes off with the Gold Coast after Bathurst when it's starting to warm up a bit by then. But you want the Gold Coast to be warm, so it much suits winter for me. I know it competes with football, and that's what they're trying to get away from, is competing with AFL and NRL, because I think they like their chances better against cricket and A-League. But unless they was going to hold a lot more races at night time, which would again drive the cost of the whole event up, it's just going to be too hot at some of these circuits. Eastern Creek, it can still get to 38, 40 degrees. We even had mid-40s out there over the last couple of summers on the odd day. Could you imagine? There's no shade at these circuits, half of them. How do you have a race out at Eastern Creek when it's 46 degrees and only the one covered grandstand? No one's going to go. You just got to say, bugger it, I'm going home, I'm watching it on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
I can crank the aircon up.
Yeah, in Darwin especially is just an absolute hellhole there. I've attended Darwin many times, and it's during the winter, and at the beginning of the day it's about 25 degrees, so it's nice. People are wearing jumpers though because they're from Darwin.
That's it. It's freezing.
Yeah, but then by the time you get to the middle of the day when the race is on and you're standing at the fence, it's 35 degrees, and it's almost unbearably hot in winter time, and it gets up to about 42 or 45 degrees in Darwin during summer. So
that's it, especially if you're in the sun.
And everyone's just gonna pass out, and it's gonna be atrocious for the drivers because it's gonna end up being 80 degrees in those cabins. And I just don't see why they're thinking that's a good idea, because it's already really hot for the drivers during Darwin and Townsville. So it's just a really stupid move, I think.
Yeah, especially if they've got that kind of silly cool suit rule and suit freezes up, which happened to Cam Waters in Adelaide, and they only let you get to a certain point, and then it's not, you've got to come in because they had a few bits of data that they were using to tell whether they needed to come in. But that ruined the race, and he said he felt fine.
Yeah.
We obviously seen what I know. It's on the back of David Reynolds having his issues at Bathurst, where he was cramping up, but that wasn't down to just the race. It was because he was burning the candle at both ends, doing all of the PR work in the week leading up to it. He just wasn't getting enough sleep. He wasn't properly hydrated going into the event. That's what they should be looking at. They don't need to be telling a driver that, oh no, your cool suit's frozen up and this and this popped up, so you've got to come in to get that change now, because that it automatically puts you a lap down and you've ruined the race. Like Cam was running really well in that first race, and then it just completely ruined it for him. And that will probably just happen more in summer, because they're going to need to keep the cool suits, try and keep them even cooler for one. But if everyone's going to be running them, look, in winter they cool suits because it's going to be hot in the car, but they'd rather not worry about the cool suit. It's going to be, might be 40 degrees cabin temperature, but they can deal with that. They're not going to worry about a cool suit. But you're going to need that at every single race regardless, and you're probably going to have half the field have to come in and get their cool suit fixed up because they're all freezing up because they have to pack a bit of extra ice in there to keep them cool.
Yeah, exactly. Also, my final little bit that I would change for supercars is I'd go back to Owen Park and I'd demolish all the houses that were there and rebuild Owen Park again, because that's my favourite circuit.
Just find a new location for it somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Move it down the road somewhere and rebuild it there. It'd be, or just demolish the houses. Yeah. So, might have a few upset residents, but that's.
Oh look, we had a few thousand upset race fans as well, so.
And that's it. I wonder how many of those race fans actually bought a house out there just so they could be on the old Oran Park site.
Yeah,
might be a couple.
I think we touched on it briefly in the last podcast. I don't know whether we were recording or not, but I just loved Owen Park just because of the bridge in it, because I just thought that was so cool that there was a bridge in the circuit. And they also had truck racing there for ages as well, which is a bit interesting with the bridge. Maybe that's why they had to shut it down. The trucks were too much weight on that bridge.
Maybe. Well, it was like just being it was our only figure eight circuit in Australia, and but it always had good racing. Like it had a couple of overtaking opportunities. I really enjoyed watching racing from there, and even the old V8 Supercars games on the PlayStation. It was always one of the first tracks. It was like one of my go-tos, along with Bathurst and Adelaide. If I was going to go for a race on that game, I just loved Oran Park that much. It'd be awesome if you could find somewhere to rebuild it, and it should live again.
Yeah, for sure. You gotta incorporate all the bumps though, especially coming down into that first corner where it's just bump, 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 bump all the way in the braking zone.
Yeah, you'd often see it, especially in the wet lockups you'd have going into. Well, I think technically turn 2. I think they always count that kink as turn 1. But you always had a lot of lockups going into there, but even going over the back of the circuit, there was always that chance of getting that a little bit wrong, especially if you're on bad tyres when the guy behind was on fresh tyres. Often seen it where someone would just be having that extra bit of speed and bump into them and bump them off the circuit or into the wall even. So it was just a fantastic little circuit. I'd love to see that one again.
Yeah. So that just about wraps up our podcast. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries, mate. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you in the next round at Barbagallo for the Super Night. So that should be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that.
So we'll see you all then. Bye.